华人民共和国代表团的名义，感谢主席。
世界只有一个体系，就是以联合国为核心的国际体系。联合国应该高举真正的多边主义旗帜。我们将继续积极推动中国同联合国合作迈向新台阶。
Hello and welcome to this new session of Vision China. I'm Hu Zhe from China Daily. This year marks the 50th anniversary of the restoration of China's lawful seat in the UN. Over the past 50 years, China, with concrete actions, has lived up to the purposes and principles of the UN Charter and has served as an important builder of world peace and a big contributor to global development. In this episode of Vision China, we are joined by officials, prominent experts and scholars who will share their perspectives on China's relationship with the UN, as well as China's contributions to global governance and addressing global challenges. First, I would like to introduce the honorable guests who attend our event today, and they are Amina Mohammed, Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations; Wang Chao, President of Chinese People's Institute of Foreign Affairs, President of United Nations Association of China; Zhou Shuchun, Member of the Standing Committee of the 13th National Committee of the CPPCC, Publisher and Editor-in-Chief of China Daily. And there are 5 inspirational speakers who will join our discussion today, and they are Xu Shuyun, Member of Executive Board of the United Nations Association of China; His Excellency Asina Buhalfa, Ambassador of Algeria to China; Ruan Zongze, Executive Vice President of the China Institute of International Studies; Jeffrey Sachs, President of UN Sustainable Development Solutions Network, Director of Sustainable Development of Columbia University; Matteo Marchisio, Representative of the International Fund for Agricultural Development in China and Mongolia. Now, to deliver the opening remarks, please welcome Amina Mohammed, Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, this month marks the 50th anniversary of the restoration of China's lawful rights in the United Nations. I would like to take this opportunity to commend China for its support to the United Nations throughout the past 5 decades. We appreciate not only China's steadfast financial support over the decades, which enables the entire UN system to support peace and development around the world, but its support of the landmark reforms we are undertaking to strengthen the UN development system for the future. The last 50 years have seen China reach a number of remarkable milestones, from lifting over 750 million people out of poverty to declaring the ambitious goal of reaching carbon neutrality by 2060. And we need China's continued support as the world faces tremendous challenges. The COVID-19 pandemic is still ravaging the planet. Time is running out in our fight against climate change, and we are off track in our collective efforts to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. We count on China to stand behind our work to promote climate action, defend global peace, and help us fully deliver on the promise of the 2030 Agenda. And we urge China to continue playing a pivotal role to reassert the value of multilateral collaboration so the United Nations is adequately equipped and ready to deliver on its mandates. Ladies and gentlemen, 50 years of cooperation between China and the United Nations have brought remarkable achievements. We must build on the progress made and continue to work together to ensure a better and more prosperous future for people and our planet. The 2030 Agenda is our blueprint in this endeavour, and we count on China's continued support as we translate this ambitious vision into reality in every country. As you prepare for today's deliberations, I encourage you to remember the Secretary-General's recent call. The pandemic has underscored the need for a strengthened and renewed multilateralism. We must reimagine the way nations cooperate. The United Nations looks forward to working closely with China to make this happen. I wish you a successful event.
Thank you, Madam, for your opening speech. Next, we will hear opening remarks from Mr. Wang Chao, President of Chinese People's Institute of Foreign Affairs, President of United Nations Association of China.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me a great pleasure to join you in VisionChina. This year coincides with the 100th anniversary of the founding of the Communist Party of China and the 50th anniversary of the restoration of the lawful seat of the People's Republic of China in the United Nations. Over the past 100 years, the Communist Party of China has led the Chinese people in striving for their own independence and development, and at the same time made outstanding contributions to safeguarding world peace and promoting the development and the progress of humanity. In 1945, China was a founding member of the United Nations and the first to sign on the UN Charter. 50 years ago, the UN General Assembly adopted Resolution 2758, deciding to restore the lawful seat of the People's Republic of China in the United Nations. This epoch-making event significantly enhanced the universality and the representativeness and the authority of the United Nations, ushered in a new stage in China's foreign relations. Since then, China has made great efforts and important contributions to fulfilling the aspirations of the United Nations and promoting the development and the progress of mankind. Over the past 50 years, China has firmly upheld the international order with the purposes and the principles of the UN Charter at its core, and has played an increasingly important role in the UN affairs along with other developing countries. On peace and security issues, China actively promotes the settlement of disputes and conflicts through peaceful means. It has become the largest contributor of peacekeepers among the permanent members of the Security Council, the second largest funding contributor to the UN and the UN peacekeeping operations. China has worked relentlessly to promote common development. It has made the poverty eradication target set out in the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, 10 years ahead of the scheduled timeline. By engaging in multifaceted development assistance, China has become a natural leader in South-South cooperation. It has also launched the Belt and Road Initiative to promote common development. China has made remarkable achievements in promoting and protecting human rights. It has actively participated in the work of the UN human rights bodies, contributed to the formulation of international human rights instruments, and played an important role in promoting constructive dialogue and cooperation in the field of international human rights. In the face of global challenges such as climate change, China has worked actively for the adoption of the Paris Agreement, proposed its target of CO2 emission peak and carbon neutrality, and set forth new measures for nationally determined contributions. At present, mankind is facing the twin challenges of profound changes unseen in a century and a sudden outbreak of COVID-19. China has engaged actively in international cooperation against COVID-19, honored its commitment of making Chinese vaccines a global public good. China has provided more than 1.2 billion doses of finished and bulk vaccines to over 100 countries and international organizations, and will strive to provide a total of 2 billion doses of vaccines to the world by the end of this year. Like all responsible countries in the world, China is actively contributing wisdom and strength to global governance led by the United Nations. At the general debate of the 76th session of the United Nations General Assembly, President Xi Jinping proposed the Global Development Initiative, which calls on the international community to accelerate implementation of the 2030 SDGs for more robust, greener, and more balanced global development, and foster a global community of development with a shared future. This major initiative has set out a blueprint for the development of countries and international development cooperation. The world now stands at a new historical starting point. Looking forward, China will continue to be a true follower of multilateralism. It will stay actively engaged in reforming and developing the global governance system, firmly uphold the UN-centered international system and international order underpinned by international law, and firmly defend the UN's central role in international affairs. The Chinese people will continue to work with the peoples of the United Nations to uphold the original aspiration of the UN Charter, strengthen confidence, join hands to meet challenges, build peace and stability, and achieve common development. The road of cooperation between China and the UN is bound to become wider and wider. Finally, I wish this Vision China event a complete success. Thank you.
That is Mr. Wang Chao there making opening remarks. Now let's welcome Zhou Shuchen, member of the Standing Committee of the 13th National Committee of the CPPCC, publisher and editor-in-chief of China Daily, to say a few words.
Distinguished guests, friends of Vision China, this year marks the 50th anniversary of the restoration of the lawful seat of the People's Republic of China in the United Nations. 50 years is but a moment in human history, but the past 50 years constitute a giant leap in the relations between China and the rest of the world. As a nation with a civilization of over 5,000 years, China has always been an awesome presence that can never be ignored. But it is in recent decades that the country has grown into an essential and integral part of the modern world. Today, as President Xi Jinping has observed, China is more than the country itself, not just China of China. Rather, it has transformed into a China of the world. The past half-century has witnessed a profound change of China's status in the landscape of the world, and more importantly, testified to the country's unique contribution to the advancement of humanity. Over the past 50 years, China has been a builder of world peace. From day one, that is November the 15th, 1971, when Qiao Guanhua, head of the PRC delegation, spoke at the UN General Assembly for the first time, China has remained steadfast in upholding the ideals of peace, amity, and harmony. As a symbol of China being an anchor of stability for the world today, the country sends the largest number of personnel of UN peacekeeping missions across the globe, among the permanent members of the Security Council. Over the past 50 years, China has been a contributor to global development, not least because, as the Chinese saying goes, it's already an important contribution to the world if we run our own house well. For the past decade and more, over 70% of global poverty reduction has come from China. And as the world's second largest economy, China is rightly called the largest engine of the world, having contributed 30% of global growth for many years in a row. Over the past 50 years, China has been a defender of the international order. For China, there is only one international system, one with the UN at its core. And there is only one international order, the one that's based on international law. Having joined nearly all intergovernmental organizations and over 500 international treaties, China firmly and conscientiously safeguards the core role of the United Nations in international affairs. That's why UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has called China the backbone of multilateralism. Today, the world is experiencing a new phase of uncertainty and volatility as it is undergoing drastic changes while struggling with a global pandemic, both unseen in a century. It is a testing time and one that will shape humanity's future. This session of Vision China is meant to review the currents of the past and envision the horizons of the future at a time when the world is headed toward a new crossroads. In addressing the general debates of the 76th session of the UN General Assembly last month, President Xi once again elaborated on the theme of jointly building a better world for all. His propositions on what kind of world to build and how to build a world amount to banners that embody the common aspirations of the international community, and they will surely have far-reaching influence on the future of the world. To build a better world for all, we need to hold high the banner of shared future. A great number of sages, scholars, and thinkers in history have looked forward and upward to the building of a better world, either in the form of a world of great harmony sought by China, or in the republic and perpetual peace as pursued in the West. The proposal for building a community with a shared future for mankind, put forth by President Xi, represents a modern and realizable version of the dream cherished throughout the history of mankind. It will prove to serve as something of a beacon guiding the ships of history into a brighter future. To build a better world for all, we need to hold high the banner of common values of humanity. On international occasions, including the UN General Assembly and the World Political Parties Summit, President Xi has repeatedly stressed the need to champion the values of peace, development, equity, justice, democracy, and freedom. There is no doubt that China will dedicate itself more than ever before to the common progress of mankind. To build a better world for all, we need to hold high the banner of true multilateralism. Multilateralism lies at the center of the modern international system and order. As State Chancellor and Foreign Minister Wang Yi pointed out, the 193 member states of the United Nations are not 193 boats, but 193 sailors on the same boat, and they must unite under the banner of multilateralism so they can better weather the storms. To build a better world for all, we need to hold high the banner of high-quality development. In his speech at the UN Biodiversity Conference in Kunming, President Xi called for all countries to join hands and set upon a journey of high-quality development for humanity. Sustainable development is possible only when it's based on the harmonious coexistence of man and nature. And it is only by working together to build a community of all life on earth can we secure a better future for ourselves and future generations. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Zhou, for your wonderful speech. For today's speaker presentation segment, we're delighted to be joined by 5 insightful speakers who will offer their perspectives on China's contribution to UN causes and how can China better participate in global governance. Now let's get started by watching a short video about our first speaker, who had worked with the UN for several decades and witnessed many watershed moments in Sino-UN cooperation. Please welcome Mr. Xu Shuyun, member of the Executive Board of the United Nations Association of China.
Hello, everyone. It's a great pleasure for me to see and to speak to you on this very important occasion. Year 2021 marks the 50th anniversary of the restoration of the lawful seat of the People's Republic of China in the United Nations. The significance of this event cannot be overestimated. Firstly, it was a great victory in the history of China's modern diplomacy. Secondly, China's return to the United Nations greatly encouraged and strengthened the developing country as a driving force in the international arena. With the strong support of China, the Group of 77 urged the United Nations to convene the 6th and 7th United Nations General Assembly special sessions in 1974 and 1975. Charter of Economic Rights and Duties of all countries was also adopted by the United Nations General Assembly. These important events vividly demonstrate the strong aspirations of the developed countries for a new international economic order. Thirdly, China's returning to the UN laid down the foundation for China's reform and opening up in late 1970s, which resulted in China's integration into the global economy and the subsequent tremendous changes and accelerated economic development of China. During the past 50 years, I was privileged to have the opportunity to work in the field of economic and technical cooperation between China and the United Nations system. Briefly speaking, I first worked in the Chinese government, the Ministry of Foreign Economic Relations. Very soon, I was assigned to work in the Chinese permanent mission to the United Nations for 5 years. When I returned to China, I witnessed the reform and opening up processes. I was assigned to work with the UN developing system in initiating its offices and programs in China. Beginning from 1982, I joined the United Nations as its staff and continuously worked for almost 25 years. After retirement, apart from short-term assignment from the United Nations, I worked to promote United Nations Millennium Development Goals and Sustainable Development Goals in China's NGOs and private sector. In short, by chance or not, in the past 50 years, I fortunately witnessed the change and development of the China-UN relations, particularly in the field of economic and technical cooperation. Based on my personal experience in the past 50 years working in the field of China-UN economic and technical cooperation, I would like to share with my friends here some of my observations and views. Your comments will be most welcomed and appreciated. Number one, the China-UN relations has been gradually developed and strengthened through constant discussions and consultations. It is a prolonged process of mutual understanding and trust between the two sides. For instance, immediately after China returned to the United Nations, China quickly pledged a contribution to UNDP to set up a few training centers of freshwater fishery and aquaculture, etc., which were greatly welcomed by the developing countries. The 8 principles of China aid was very much appreciated by the UN development system. However, although China was also a developing country, China at that time did not accept UN assistance. I call this phase as one-way street. In 1979, Deng Xiaoping told the visiting UNDP administrator, Mr. Bradford Morse, that as a developing country, China would welcome economic and technical assistance from UN system. I was soon assigned to draft UNDP's first country program in China. The program included a few but very important projects, such as satellite remote sensing, oil drilling techniques, etc. Many people who received training abroad under the arrangement by the United Nations eventually became core technical or managerial staff in many research institutions and enterprises. The United Nations provided China with a platform accessing international advanced technique and management. To be honest, although the UN assistance for China during that period was modest in amount, comparing to the great needs of China, China still benefited a lot during the 1980s and 1990s, for which we Chinese people will never forget. I describe this change as from one-way street phase to two-way street phase. Since the reform and opening up, the China-UN cooperation was enhanced to a higher level. For all the UN agencies and organizations, China has become a net contributor. The former UN Secretary General, Mr. Kofi Annan, once said to me, China is the only country which feedbacks the UN system. China's South-South initiative and programs are being implemented energetically. The $2 billion South-South Foundation announced by Chinese President Xi at the UN Development Summit in 2015 and One Belt, One Road initiative are being actively implemented. All this contributes to building a community with a shared future. Once when I mentioned this new phase, the former United Nations Secretary General, Mr. Ban Ki-moon, said to me that we should perhaps name this third phase as a Broadway. From one-way street to two-way street, now it's Kangjiang Dadao, second largest contributor to the UN peacekeeping operation. This increase is a clear indication of China's increased international responsibilities. I'm fully confident that China-UN cooperation will further develop in the future. 3. The United Nations system should be more confident in itself and should stick to true multilateralism and to the purposes and principles of the United Nations Charter. It should consistently uphold justice and never yield to any pressure or interferences from a certain country or a group of certain countries. Chinese President Xi said in his recent speech at the 76th session of the United Nations General Assembly, we must improve global governance and practice true multilateralism. There is only one international system, that is the international system with the United Nations at its core. Like all national or international institutions and organizations, the current UN system is far away from being perfect. It needs continuous improvement through various changes, reforms, and restructuring. Efforts should be made to further improve priority setting, budget controlling, and to forge greater synergy among multilateral development processes. UN development agencies should heed the views and aspirations of the recipient countries and simplify their implementation rules and regulations in order to achieve effective results. Programs and activities in the field should be further streamlined and coordinated to meet the needs of the people in the recipient countries. In recent years, the United Nations has never stopped its efforts in this regard, but further efforts are still needed in order to reach the Sustainable Development Goals by year 2030. Number 4, we should keep in mind that China is still a developing country. While we should try hard to fulfill our duties and responsibilities in the United Nations, we should not allow some developed countries, especially a certain superpower, to shift their responsibilities in the United Nations. Number 5, and finally, I think we should encourage more young people to join the United Nations system and to work for its noble cause. A few UN specialized agencies are now headed by Chinese. However, generally speaking, we still need more young Chinese to join the UN system, not only at headquarters, but also in the field across the world. Not only senior staffs, but also junior ones, such as the United Nations volunteers. China-UN associations, together with some universities, have in the recent years successfully organized many model UN activities and held lectures on UN-related subjects to stimulate young people's interest in the UN affairs. More intelligent Chinese young people serving the noble cause of the United Nations will certainly contribute to build a global community with a shared future for mankind. Chairman Mao once said that China should make greater contribution to mankind. It's time for us to act. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Xi, for giving us a detailed account of the historic evolution of Sino-UN cooperation. As Mr. Xi put it, it's a prolonged process of mutual understanding and trust between the two sides. Our next speaker is His Excellency Asina Buhalfa, Ambassador of Algeria to China. Now let's get to know him through a short video.
Honorable high officials, leaders of international governmental and non-governmental organizations, distinguished attendees, researchers and academics, ladies and gentlemen. I am very pleased to participate today in this forum, China and the United Nations, Building Peace Through Development, organized by China Daily for the 50th anniversary of the restoration of the lawful rights of the People's Republic of China to the United Nations. As Ambassador of Algeria to China, I participate in this forum with great emotion and pride, given that the draft resolution 2758, adopted by the General Assembly of the United Nations on October 25, 1971, to allow the People's Republic of China to restore its lawful rights, was submitted by my country, Algeria, supported by 20 other developed countries. This reflects, in my opinion, the historical friendship and the strong relation between our two countries, Algeria and China, for more than 63 years. At the outset, I would like to renew my congratulations to the People's Republic of China, first for the centenary of the founding of the Communist Party of China, and at the same time for the impressive achievements that have been made thanks to it, both at the domestic and international levels. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to make some remarks regarding China's contribution to the international arena over the past 50 years. On the political side, we must recall that the Chinese foreign policy is based on many noble principles, such as respecting the sovereignty of countries regardless of their power, in addition to non-interference in their internal affairs, as well as giving priority to the dialogue and avoiding the violence or the use of force to solve disputes, as well as goodwill in dealing with the international community, which does not carry any desires for external expansion. These principles, which derive their spirit from the great civilizational accumulation of the Chinese nation for thousands of years, have undoubtedly contributed to building relation of trust between China and many countries, as they encourage the international community to try to better engage in order to achieve the common interests and the common destiny of mankind within the framework of international relations based on clear principles derived also from international laws and in an international system in which the United Nations plays the most prominent role. In addition, for more than 50 years, China has supported many just causes and sided with many oppressed peoples and preferred to be on the side of values and principles rather than narrow and temporary political interest, which is rare, at least for many other major powers in the world. Distinguished attendees, as for pluralism, I can say without courtesy that China is the biggest actor defending a world away from unipolarity because of its negative effects, such like wars, permanent conflicts, and hostilities between states. In this regard, China is the prominent contributor to many international organizations in various fields, and Chinese founding has contributed to the success of many programs run by United Nations organization, in addition to the great role that Chinese human resources play in this organization. Thanks to their distinguished competencies, we must stress that these contributions never carried a desire to control these organizations or direct their policies in favor of specific political or ideological gains. In addition, China's contribution to the United Nations peacekeeping forces in various regions of the world have played a prominent role in the good management of conflicts and preventing their further aggravation, which indicates the concern that China attaches to the global peace and security. China's contributions to international peace and security extend to the multilateral aspect as well, through multiple partnerships linking it to various regions of the world without exceptions. In this regard, I would like to commend the level of cooperation between China and African countries and China and Arab countries. In addition to the great cooperation between China and African countries, which was achieved within the framework of the China-Africa Cooperation Forum, which exists now for more than 20 years and also involved several stations and proved the high degree of understanding between the two sides and their common desire to consolidate relations more and more. The China-Arab Cooperation Forum, since its launch in 2004, reached a high and important level of cooperation between the two sides, especially since we are preparing the first Arab-Chinese summit in Saudi Arabia in 2022. These partnerships represent a valuable opportunity for all developing countries to build their capabilities and benefit from the great development that China is experiencing in various fields. In addition to openness and peacefulness, I emphasize here the peacefulness which characterizes Chinese foreign policy and its role in achieving mutual benefit within the framework of win-win partnerships. In this context, we must also highlight the large number of cooperation frameworks between China and other countries at the regional, global, and even transcontinental levels, all of which cannot be mentioned here, but we can refer to the ASEAN, BRICS, Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and many others, which indicates China's desire to build friendly and cooperative relations with its international counterparts without exclusion and within the framework of honest competition if necessary. I would like here to highlight that Chinese President Mr. Xi Jinping on 21st of September 2021 proposed a global development initiative to steer global development towards a new phase of balanced, coordinated, and inclusive growth in the face of the severe impact of COVID-19. We need to revive the economy and promote stronger, greener, and more balanced global development, President Xi said in his speech at the general debate of the 76th session of the UN General Assembly this year. Ladies and gentlemen, I am thus incredibly pleased to seize this opportunity to applaud the significant achievements made by the People's Republic of China in tackling its most important challenge of poverty alleviation and reaching, by the end of last year, 2020, its target of eliminating extreme poverty all over China 10 years ahead of schedule of UN 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. I agree here with a lot of Chinese and foreign observers considering such achievement as a miracle for a developing country for more than 1.4 billion inhabitants, especially when we take into account that official statistic indicates that around 100 million people were lifted out of extreme poverty since 2012, while over the past 40 plus years, more than 700 million people in China have been lifted out of poverty. This and the important contribution to the global fight against poverty that represents more than 70% of the global poverty reduction. The economic level plays also a key role in achieving international peace, and it must be noted the contribution and potentials of the Belt and Road Initiative in achieving the joint development of China and developing countries, as it can make great achievements in the fight against poverty in the world, as it was the successful case in China, and making better levels of development and infrastructure construction and linking national economies with the global economy, allowing the elimination of the causes of internal and external wars and conflicts. In the environment aspect also, China makes initiative and financial and intellectual contributions in order to save the planet from any unpleasant situation. Just here, I would like to congratulate China on its successful hosting of the summit of the States Party to the Convention of Biodiversity COP15 held in Kunming. I express my appreciation for its contribution in the eradication of the COVID-19 pandemic and its valuable cooperation with various countries, including my country, Algeria, in the share and local production of the vaccines. This indicates the attention China attaches to the challenges facing humankind and its willingness to work with various partners to maintain sustainable development and safeguard the common destiny of humanity. Distinguished attendees, as you know, Algeria, my country, in addition to the historical relation it has with China, the two countries are considered exceptional partners at all levels. Algeria is the first country in the Arab region to conclude a comprehensive strategic partnership with China in 2014, which reflects the high level of trust between the political leadership of the two countries. Algeria and China share also most of the views on many important issues, and the two countries maintain a high degree of coordination and periodic political consultation, especially as we are putting the final touches on the 5-year plan for comprehensive strategic cooperation 2021-2025, which will represent a qualitative addition to the content of bilateral cooperation in various domains. In the economic field, in addition to the fact that China is Algeria's first economic partner in the world, and the two countries are currently implementing a number of projects of a strategic nature for the two economies. Algeria has officially joined in 2018 the Belt and Road Initiative, and we are counting on the Chinese partner to jointly build capacities and harmonize plans development in a way that allows for the continuation of mutual benefit. Finally, I would like to renew my thanks for the invitation and to all participants for listening and for their valuable speeches. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your perceptive speech, in which you have asserted the positive role China plays in maintaining international peace, defending pluralism, fighting against global poverty, and building win-win partnerships with other countries. Thank you, sir. Now let's welcome our next speaker, Mr. Ran Zongze, Executive Vice President of the China Institute of International Studies. And before hearing from him, let's watch a short video about him.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. I want to appreciate the organizers' kind invitation for me to participate in this event. VisionChina plays an important part to bridge China and the world by sharing ideas and increasing mutual understanding. This is particularly useful when the world is undergoing tremendous changes. This year marks the 50th anniversary of the restoration of the lawful seat of the People's Republic of China in the United Nations. It is an amazing photo, isn't it? It became an icon for China's diplomatic confidence. However, what's behind the happy moment was a long and tough diplomatic struggle. The founding of the UN was a milestone in humanity's pursuit of peace and development. China was the first country to put its signature on the UN Charter. On October 25, 1971, the UN General Assembly, at its 26th session, adopted Resolution 2758 with the overwhelming majority. Clearly, Resolution 2758 endorsed the One China principle in international relations. It recognized the representatives of the PRC government as the only legitimate representatives of China to the United Nations. The PRC restored the lawful seat at the UN, which truly made the UN the biggest international organization in the world. Chairman Mao said it was the Africa brothers who carried us into the UN. We should stand with them. American Ambassador to UN George W. Bush admitted later that it was a turning point in the history of the UN. It was a victory for new China's diplomacy. It was a victory for justice and fairness in the world. It was a victory for the purposes and the principles of the UN Charter. The past 50 years is a win-win story regarding China's cooperation with the UN. China is always a builder of world peace. China is a contributor to global development. China is a defender of the international order. Last but not least, China is a provider of public goods. China is a champion of world peace. Beijing takes concrete actions to safeguard world peace and has actively participated in the UN peacekeeping operations, UNPKOs. China has become the largest contributor of peacekeepers among the permanent members of the Security Council. Over the past 30 years, China sent over 40,000 peacekeepers to 25 UN peacekeeping missions. They have faithfully performed their duties and made a positive contribution to the world peace and the common development. The UN highly appreciates China's contribution and efforts. Meanwhile, China has been actively exploring for political solutions to hotspot issues and opposing use of force and unilateral sanctions. China is a contributor to global development. As the world's largest developing country, China has created two miracles in terms of rapid economic growth and long-term social stability. Recently, China issued a white paper titled China's Epic Journey from Poverty to Prosperity. It documents the country's journey to moderate prosperity in all respects, or 小康. For the first time in history, China eliminated absolute poverty throughout the country. In the past 4 decades, a total of 850 million Chinese people have been lifted out of poverty, accounting for over 70% of global poverty reduction 10 years in advance of the target set out in the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. This is a very famous and popular book. The author is Xi Jinping. When he was working in Fujian province, he paid enormous attention to the poverty reduction. Thanks to the strong leadership of Communist Party of China, we made the impossible possible. However, China was not going to stop here. Next, China will embark on the new journey forward to common prosperity. No one left behind. China can do this, and we believe other developing countries can also do it. I was serving as a UNDP Human Development Report Advisory Panel member. Poverty reduction was always the hot issue on every meeting's agenda. An Africa friend once told me, Mr. Ran, you guys did a great job in fighting poverty. It's so inspiring for us. You can do it? Yes, we can. China is a defender of international order. Beijing put forth and observed 5 principles of peaceful coexistence in 1950s. So far, China has joined almost all universal intergovernmental organizations. Firmly, China safeguarded the UN-centered international system, upheld the international order underpinned by international law. To build a community with a shared future for mankind, it is important to adhere to the principle that all countries, big or small, are equal, and take an active part in the reform and improvement of the global governance system. China is a provider of public goods. China is building roads, not walls. The Belt and Road Initiative must be an exciting story in this regard. It has already become the world's largest platform for international cooperation. It originates in China, but its benefits are shared by the world. For example, the China-Europe Railway Express has played an important role in fighting COVID-19 and a revitalized economy. The development of Green Silk Road, Healthy Silk Road, and the Digital Silk Road is gaining momentum. Beijing has promised to make Chinese-made vaccines a global public good and ensure developing and the least developed countries can afford to pay for them. China will provide a total of $2 billion doses of COVID-19 vaccine to the world this year. In the latest effort to honor its commitment to make vaccines a global public good by ensuring vaccine accessibility and affordability. It will help to address the biggest challenge now facing global cooperation, the uneven accessibility and affordability of vaccines. The world, once again, is at a crossroad. There is no shortage of risks and challenges. Global threats such as the COVID-19, food shortage, energy security, climate change, inequality, etc., are profound challenges, and none of them can be effectively addressed without international cooperation. To make it even worse, the Cold War mentality is coming back, creating tensions and troubles in the world. The UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres warned global leaders of the looming risk of the world splitting in two. Make no mistake, this is a multipolar world. The right way to avert the great fracture is to maintain a universal system. The UN, as the most universal, representative, and authoritative intergovernmental organization, is the most important platform to practice multilateralism. Since its founding, the UN has played a significant role in upholding world peace, promoting common development, and facilitating international cooperation. The modernization that China will achieve is one with a huge population, one of common prosperity for all the people, and one on the road of peaceful development. I believe that China will continue to bring the world new opportunities through its new development. President Xi Jinping said, "One country's success does not have to mean another country's failure, and the world is big enough to accommodate common development and progress of all countries." Anyway, the good news is that the Beijing Winter Olympics is approaching. I cannot think of a better way to conclude my presentation by quoting the official slogan for the game, "Together for a shared future." Thank you very much for your kind attention.
That is Mr. Ruan Zongze talking about China's contributions to world peace, global development, and public good for the whole world. Our next speaker is Jeffrey Sachs, President of the UN Sustainable Development Solutions Network and Director of Sustainable Development of Columbia University. Now we will play a short video so you can learn more about him.
So good to be with you, and good to be with you on this 50th anniversary of China becoming part of the United Nations. You know, that occasion was also the time when China and the United States began cooperating again. And I want to say that that was a very propitious time for the world because cooperation between these two countries did a lot of good for both countries and for the world. This has been a tremendous period of progress for China, perhaps the greatest economic development ever seen in the world. the end of poverty in China as of 2020. So when cooperation and peace and China's role in the international system is so strong and prominent, this is a very good thing in my view. And I think we should take these 50 years as really a guidepost that we need another 50 years of strong cooperation and strong multilateralism. I've been coming frequently to China for 40 years now. China has kept true to its word, which is that it has promoted peace. Unfortunately, my own country got involved in so many wars. Wars in the Middle East, wars in Central America, and it created huge problems. So when China has committed to a peaceful approach to the world and to multilateralism, that's been a very smart strategy. Good for China, good for the world. I want the US to do the same because we spent trillions and trillions of dollars wasted in wars that were bloody, that created terrible damage and didn't result in any good. So the United States engaged in several wars after 9/11, not only Afghanistan, but Afghanistan, Iraq in 2003, where China said in the Security Council, don't do that. And the United States said, no, don't tell us what to do. But China was giving good advice. It wasn't trying to stop something that was good for the US. It was telling the US this is a big mistake. And the US got trapped in that war. The US got engaged through secret operations in Syria. The US and NATO went to war in Libya, another debacle. So this has been very costly. And it is a kind of intellectual error, actually, because the idea is, oh, we're so powerful, we can solve political or social or ethnic or economic or terrorist problems by a military approach, which doesn't work. And so this was predictably going to fail. I pleaded with the American people in things I wrote before the Iraq War, don't do this. You don't know, this will not succeed. And I think that that is the mistake. Now, I don't know whether the US has learned the lessons because there's something in the culture that continues to promote military approaches. I'm hoping that there's more understanding after all of this debacle, that we need peaceful approaches. We need development approaches. So many conflicts come because people are hungry. They don't have jobs. The economy is unstable. They don't have infrastructure. And so they can't participate in 21st century life in a decent, dignified way. And these are problems we can solve cooperatively through economic investment. And that's the approach we should be taking. My basic point is that here you have two large, complex societies, and we need very extensive discussions and communications to understand each other's point of view, to solve complicated problems, whether it's COVID or climate change or economic development and infrastructure. You can't just guess what the other counterparty is doing. We have so many complicated things to talk about. Let us have that intensive discussion and dialogue among government officials and also, I would say, academia and others who study these issues day in and day out, have friends, colleagues, counterparts, in order to be able to analyze and come up with practical approaches. So this is the most important thing. I was happy with that phone call, but I would like to see it followed up by extensive interministerial discussions and dialogue, and by what's sometimes called track two, which is informal, whether it's business community or whether it is academia or whether it's cultural exchanges. This is so important because I know from my own experience that when we're talking to each other, we're going to find common ground and we're going to find a cooperative way to work together. We've had that experience before in the United States in what we call the McCarthy era of the 1950s. when if you held views that were not absolutely aligned with the U.S. National strategy, you were deemed to be dangerous and so forth. It would be a huge mistake to reduce communications and cooperation and joint programs of research and education and other areas right now. More than ever, we're interconnected on so many things, and we should be working together. I can tell you from my personal experience, I've had so many fantastic Chinese students who have risen in Chinese society and in government, in business and so forth. I'm so proud of them, first of all, but it is the way that we should be normally cooperating is to have that absolute lifelong interchange and positive knowledge and experience across the world, in fact. And there are forces in the United States that are really not very knowledgeable about the rest of the world. Remember, we're surrounded by two big oceans. People don't necessarily know very much. A lot of our politicians don't have passports. They've never been to China. They just think they know something, but they don't really know. So we absolutely want the interchanges, the conferences, the discussions, the joint programs, and so forth. And I hope that fear does not envelop American society, because fear is what causes this kind of reactionary response. And the fear generally is based on ignorance. It's not based on knowledge. In China's terms, that is for a harmonious society. And as President Xi says, for common prosperity. And these are very crucial ideas. Also, President Xi announced at the United Nations a year ago that China's committed to reaching net zero emissions by 2060. China's so good at this, I think it's going to happen faster than that. I think it's going to happen by 2050 or earlier, because China has so much capacity in renewable energy and in clean technology and electric vehicles and in other ways. But this is what leadership is. And China, of course, plays a significant role in the United Nations in many leadership positions. And that is wonderful, in my view. China's commitment to sustainable development is crucial. I am a big fan of the Belt and Road Initiative as well, because it seems to me that the Belt and Road Initiative is really about building 21st century infrastructure. And now China's emphasizing that that will be a green Belt and Road, that's emphasizing renewable energy, digital technologies, and all of the clean, environmentally sustainable approaches. So I think that China's role is enormous. I'm very gratified that in the G20, the US and China are working together on climate finance, because this is something we really need. We have a big transformation to make. But we should do what China is very good at doing, by the way, which is set clear goals and timelines, and then use a planning process to determine how to achieve those outcomes. So I think the United States, not just the US, but the Western world, has a lot to learn from Chinese civilizational successes and ideas over the course of millennia. And there's a lot that we can learn from each other. We need to do that. We're channeling much too much of our brain power and much too much of our wealth into war or into conflict or into arms races, which are terribly dangerous. We are so productive in terms of output that we're destroying nature itself, which is tragic, dangerous, and absurd, because that same technology could be protecting nature rather than destroying nature. We obviously have to learn better how to contain emerging diseases. COVID-19 isn't the last of them. We've had an accelerating number of emerging diseases over the period of the 21st century, there will be more to come because they're part and parcel of disruption of nature as well. And we need new approaches. Look at how effectively China has suppressed the transmission of the virus, but my country has not, and many others have not. We need to learn best practices. So in a case like a pandemic, or in climate change, or in global pollution, or destruction of fisheries, no one country, even theoretically, can solve that problem. And so we absolutely need global scale solutions. And that requires values. That requires the ability to work well together. That requires the ability to plan well together. That requires the recognition that the normal forces of nationalism or market economy are not sufficient.
That was Professor Jeffrey Sachs talking about why mutually beneficial relationships between countries can only be achieved through intensive multi-level dialogues and interchanges, and the role China plays in advancing the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Thank you, sir, for your enlightening words. Now let's welcome our last speaker, Matteo Marchiseo, representative of the International Fund for Agricultural Development in China and Mongolia. Now let's watch an introductory video about him.
Ni hao and good evening to everyone. Let me start by a recurrent question that I'm often asked when interviewed. Journalists often ask me what are the most noticeable changes that I've noticed since I've been working here in China. I've been working in China since 2014, so it's now my seventh year in China. And over this period of time, I've traveled in most poor and remote areas of the countries to design or supervise our projects. I've been to Qinghai, Ningxia, Sichuan, Yunnan, Hunan, Jiangxi, Hubei, just to name a few provinces where I traveled to. And I could easily respond by referring to the improvements in the infrastructures. I've seen rural roads connecting remote villages to towns and cities, or electrifications, remote villages that now have access to electricity or to clean water. Or I can also refer to reforestation, bare lands that are now covered with trees, hilly or mountainous areas that are now covered by trees. But if I have to identify, to pick the most striking element that I noticed since I'm here, I would probably refer to the attitude of the people that we normally interview and interact with when we travel to the field. The increased sense of confidence in the future, the increased sense, the higher optimism towards the future. This is something intangible. This is something that cannot be measured. Yet it's very telling about China's history and on development. So let me now move to China and China's contribution to global development and poverty reduction. Poverty has always been a formidable challenge for humanity since ever. In 1990, for example, more than 2 billion people were living in poverty. That was about 1/3 of the world population at that time. And in 2015, this number has dropped to slightly above 700 million. This outstanding drop can be by and large attributed to China's progress in reducing poverty. If we consider that China in early 1980s, there were about 800 million people in China living in poverty, and that by 2015 that number dropped to less than 100 million. So we can rightly say that most of the global improvements in poverty reduction, at least in the past few decades, can be attributed to China's progress in addressing poverty. As a matter of fact, China was the first country to achieve the Millennium Development Goals to halve poverty by 2015. And China's contribution to poverty has continued after 2015. Last year, China announced it has finally eradicated extreme poverty, becoming the first country to achieve the Sustainable Development Goal 1, that is ending poverty by 2030. The first country to achieve that goal 10 years ahead the global deadlines. But now let me reflect a bit on the significance of such achievement. And here let me go back to the story that I referred at the very beginning. So poverty reduction, sustainable development does not only materialize in material improvements, in material changes. It also reflects in the change of attitude of people, in the increased optimism, in the increased confidence in the future, in the hope that people have. And this is to me the greatest contribution that China made to global development. The fact that by eradicating poverty, it has demonstrated to the rest of the world that eradicating poverty is possible, and is possible within our lifetime. Now, let me bring the United Nations into the picture. There are no doubts that the United Nations had a key role in promoting sustainable development and poverty reduction. Let me take as an example my organization, the International Fund for Agricultural Development, or IFAD. An organization, a specialized agency of the United Nations whose mandate is to reduce poverty, improve food securities, and promote rural development. Since 1977, when IFAD was established, IFAD provided more than 23 billion financing to developing countries to finance poverty reduction and rural development projects, reaching out and benefiting more than 500 million people, half of which women, and most of which what we call belonging to vulnerable groups. That is to say, smallholder farmers or farmers that live with less than 1 hectare of land, indigenous people or ethnic minorities or youth. Now, what is the role of the United Nations in global development? Certainly the United Nations contributed with financing to development projects, with technical assistance, and that was important. But beyond that, I believe that a key role that the United Nations play is that they represent the soul or the conscience of the world, as they define our vision of development. They basically tell us what humanity can aspire to, and they constantly remind us the challenges that we have to face to achieve that vision. And this is simply embodied in the Sustainable Development Goals. That is to say, 17 goals, 17 objectives that represent what humanity should and can aspire to. A world free of poverty, a world free of hunger, a world where people can freely access education or health, a world where women and men have equal opportunities, or a world where environment is taken care of. So let me conclude by trying to bring together China and the United Nations and reflect on the role that China today can play in global development and how China and the United Nations can work together to pursue that goal. China has made incredible achievements domestically. It has eradicated hunger in early 2000. It has ended poverty last year. So in my view, the next test bench will not be anymore in domestic issues, but it will be outside its national borders. So contributing to addressing global challenges, peace, security, reduction of global biodiversity, global warming, climate change, contributing to address these challenges and contributing to build global public goods is probably the area where China and the United Nations overlaps and can work in the future. So in my view, if I look ahead, China and the United Nations need to work together to put together their resources, energy, commitment towards this end, towards addressing global challenges and building a better world. I thank you very much for your attention. 谢谢.
Mr. Marchisio pointed out how China's domestic poverty alleviation efforts have contributed to the significant progress in global poverty reduction. Thank you, sir, for sharing your observations with us. Well, that's all for today's speaker presentations. We really appreciate the valuable input of our speakers on the great significance of China's return to the UN, the achievements and experiences of China's cooperation with the UN, and how China can further participate in global governance. I'm afraid we have to end here for this edition of Vision China. Thank you so much for watching us online. And if you are interested in getting the latest updates on global affairs, please visit us at www.chinadaily.com.cn, download the China Daily app, or follow us on Weibo, WeChat, Facebook, or Twitter. Please stay tuned for more future sessions of Vision China, where we'll be discussing key issues and opportunities facing China and the world. Stay safe and do join us next time. Good night.